Hi, this is Kate of the Dinner Sisters podcast, here with a special interview episode of Dorothy Callens, the author of The Kitchen Whisperers. We're super excited to have her on the podcast. I did this interview a couple weeks ago, and it was so fun. I was just delighted to meet one of my heroes. She was the co-founder of Savoir magazine back in the day, an editor-in-chief. She also co-founded Metropolitan Home magazine, if you're familiar with that. So this lady is a powerhouse, and she's cooked with all sorts of people over the years, including David Tanis and a whole bunch of other chefs. So if you're someone who's into recipes, food magazines, celebrity chefs, regular chefs, this is an interview for you, which frankly, if you're listening to this podcast, just might be your thing. We talked a lot. She was lovely, and I think you'll really enjoy hearing all of her influences and then all the things that she learned in her life of cooking with some of the top chefs. Let's listen in. So, Dorothy, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview with us. This is Kate from the Dinner Sisters, for all of the folks that are tuning in. And Dorothy, I thought we could just start with just introducing yourself and maybe telling us a little bit about your book.
So, I've been a magazine editor my whole life. And what I concentrate on are ideas. I love to find the best ideas and share them with readers. And that's what I've done much of my career. And then when I started to do cookbooks, I worked with wonderful, wonderful chefs and produced books for them the way I produce magazines, which was kind of ideas first. But you know what really started the idea of this book, which is called The Kitchen Whisperers, was a real experience of listening to the ideas that were coming in my head. For example, I'd come home from the farmer's market with a load of greens and everything would be filthy. I mean, good filth, dirt. And I always thought of a woman who was the grandmother of my stepdaughter, if that gets any more complicated, but who I met in France several times, and she said to me, always wash the salad greens 3 times to get, and I realized that I had me, my daughter's grandmother in her head when I washed greens. And then I thought, wait a minute, how crazy is this? And then I started thinking about all the people who have influenced me and their ideas. And it really comes back, as I said, to being a magazine editor where you really zero in on the ideas. And then I was kind of doing it for myself, making a magazine for myself in my head. Where did these ideas come from? Every time I boil pasta, I hear Marcella saying to me, but only put the water in I only put the salt in when the water is boiling. In other words, but those things play in your head. And then I started thinking very hard about that. And I started thinking that other people must have these same experiences. They must remember the things that somebody told them. And it's not necessary. It's not that you don't do cookbooks, because cookbooks are really important and we need to know the amount of ingredients and the order and all of those things. But there are so many things about cooking that really come with listening or watching people. So that's where the Kitchen Whisperers came from.
It's so, I think when I was reading the introduction to your book, and you described those voices in your head, and you described even your son's voice in your head, which I thought was hilarious when you remarked maybe he doesn't care, but I like his voices in your head. It really made me reflect on some of those voices that I have in my head,
and that's why I did the book. That's exactly why I did the book, because it would evoke your own memories.
Oh yeah, for sure. I can hear my mom, who taught me how to bake bread, who said, you do not add too much flour. Don't add too much flour. You want the dough to be elastic. You want it to be loose. Otherwise, it's going to be like a rock.
You always hear her saying that to you. And it's kind of, you capture a precious element that just plain recipes can't deliver, which is the wisdom and the personality.
Right. Right. Oh, for sure. I think it was such, I loved how that was also a through line, not only for your memoir, but for the techniques and the tips and the pieces that were in there. I remember reading about the Swiss chard and how your Swiss chard was a footnote, and then you learned to make it. If you want to talk through that story a little bit, because I thought it was so sweet.
So, well, it really started, when we were doing Saveur, we did an article, a whole issue on California. And my two co-founders, Coleman Andrews and Christopher Hersheimer, are both California born and very chauvinistic about their state.
It happens. I've heard that about New Yorkers too.
So the three of us decided that we would do the preliminary story outline for the California issue. So we started way in the north of the state. I think I flew into Oregon, and we met there, and then we actually had the ceremonial crossing of the line or something like that. And we had our first night we spent in a little tacky, funny 50s house that was on the coast, that in Northern California, very, very foggy, woody Northern California, where they smoke salmon. And so we found a salmon smoker, and we found and so we decided, we'll make a dinner based on what we find that's only here. Because that was the core of Saveur, the food from here. So Coleman made a pasta with the smoked salmon that we had gotten from a smoker, and Christopher got blueberries from the side of the road and made a great blueberry crumble. And then at a farm stand that I saw these incredible rainbow chard that were huge, 3 feet big. And each stem was a different color, the yellow ones, the red ones, the white ones. They were phenomenal. And then both Coleman and Christopher are better cooks than I. They're in a different league than I am. And I came back to the kitchen and I realized I didn't know how to make that chard. I didn't know what to do with it. It was so huge.
That's enormous.
It was enormous, and I didn't know how to break it down, and I thought, I love this vegetable, and I just don't know this vegetable. And it wasn't until several years later that I was in the kitchen of one of my other chapter subjects, David Tanis, with whom I've done several books, and we thought of an idea for a story that Christopher was photographing and I was writing for Saveur. Both of us had left, so it was a kind of a lovely return. Coleman was still the editor. We had left. And we said to David, okay, we're taking you to the market in the Fifth Arrondissement in Paris, and we're going to point to everything we want to know how to cook, and we're going to buy that, and we're going to take it home, and you're going to show us how to cook it. So we did a lobe of foie gras, and he said, piece of cake, no problem. And then we did several other things. And then we did Swiss chard. I saw this gorgeous Swiss chard in the market. I said, okay, you're going to tell me how to do it. So basically, I'll just quickly tell you what he did was, of course, first sever the stem from the leaf, make it not at all the same vegetable, cut the stems separately into little batons, and quickly, just quickly soften them in hot water, take them out, and then the leaves he rolled up like a cigar, which is such a valuable thing because I do that with spinach now. I do it with every green, collards, everything that I have, I take and I roll it, I wash it well, and then I roll it up and chop, so that you have little coils of slices,
Yeah.
and then it's a dealable thing. Then you
Right.
have something that you've tamed. So, so that was the Swiss chard lesson. And what he did was he made a bechamel, and he just did put the leaves with the sauce and put the baton of the blanched stems on top and baked it, and it was delicious. And I've never been afraid of Swiss chard since then.
Right. I mean, I love how you say that you could tame it, right? And I think there's I am currently interested in taming okra because I've just moved to Atlanta. I have not worked with it before. And so there's a restaurant that does Indian street food across the street from my place. And they do little slivers of this okra that they that they flash fry. And it's kind of chewy, crunchy with that Indian spice.
Oh, isn't that great?
Right. And so I'm like, okay, I've got to try that in addition to all the traditional ways. But it's so interesting. I like that taming the pieces. I have some questions for you too that I think we always ask. And one is what's in your kitchen right now? And what are you making right now that you're excited about, or that is just like honestly a meal that you're making because you're very busy with your book tour and you're just trying to eat something?
We have been pretty much in a lockdown in this. I live in a high rise in Midtown Manhattan, and it's not been fun. The difference is that we can go to our farmer's market, and of course we fortunately have a car that we can go away on weekends and go to see friends or go to a market or go to a farm. And so I feel like if you have corn and you have tomatoes and you have greens, you will never starve. And I just feel like I'm so loving. And melons. Cantaloupes and watermelon, peaches. I could eat only that. Last night we had for dinner BLTs. Yeah,
can't beat one.
Yeah, it's just tomato season is the best, and that's really what we're doing now. I make corn, and then we make too much, and then I have corn salad or corn pudding, but it's the only time I really cook corn except for cornbread. So so this is the wonderful time of year when that's all there.
I think that's all you need. And my sister and I have a favorite summer salad. That's the ripe tomatoes with peaches. And right. With so good. And you could but I'm not going to eat that any other month but this month.
No, that's exactly right. And you and you can put little Kirby cukes in there, and that's what cooking and eating is all about, I think.
Yeah, I love that just eating what's around. That's the best piece. Yeah. Another question we ask a lot, and I think it would be, is there a recipe or a technique that you think people reading through the book may not pay attention to because maybe it's not as flashy, but is still one of your favorites that you want to make sure people know?
I did my mother's meatloaf because it's something that I write about, finding my mother's recipes after she was gone and not recognizing any of the food in the recipe box that she had. Nothing that I don't know whether she was a secret dinner party thrower or started doing it after my sister and I had left or whatever. But there's something about that meatloaf, which is half veal and half pork and half meat, because we don't do veal anymore because it's not politically correct. So, and it has soaked bread in it, which I later learned, bread soaked in milk. And I remember my mother soaking bread in milk. And that's a French panade. It's what they call panade. And it's, of course, that gives a meatloaf an incredible texture and just juiciness. It's so wonderful. Instead of those mealy meatloaves that you remember from school.
That kind of crumble apart.
Yeah. So that's just something that I mean, it's the most ordinary thing in the world. But when you and then sometimes they put fresh tomatoes in, and our friend puts fresh tomato sauce on the top of it or whatever. But it's a wonderful thing to make.
I haven't had a meatloaf in a while, but maybe once things turn not 90 degrees.
I don't make it in the summertime. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Wow, you've got all this wonderful thing.
I know. I have a lot of tomatoes to eat yet and okra to figure out. That's for sure. And if you have any okra tips, I'm open to any okra tips.
The one thing I learned about okra from a chef in New Orleans who I worked with is only buy the smallest ones. Because when they get bigger, they get stringier and harder.
Okay.
And I grew them once, and they're so beautiful as they grow. They have these beautiful yellow flowers with smoky eyes. They're gorgeous. And getting the early ones is the secret.
Okay. That's good to know. I'm having to get to my farmer's market earlier and earlier in the morning because everything's gone.
Everything's gone.
People are which is great, right? It's
exactly. But it's true. You need to get there early. Yeah.
You know what I couldn't find? Zucchini.
No.
I'm
which everybody wants to get rid of at this point. Yeah.
We have a zucchini episode coming up. I had a zucchini I needed like 3 pounds of zucchini. I'm like, I can go to the farmer's market. They're going to give it away to me. I couldn't find any zucchini, and I texted my friend in Rhode Island and I said, "Do you know I cannot find any zucchini down here?"
Nobody would believe it.
No. And then she said in very Rhode Islander ease, she's like, "Well, that's BS." they're a very front-facing people, the Rhode Islanders.
I have a French way of doing tomatoes in zucchini. So you slice them all in half. I mean, I don't mean in half. You slice them in circles.
Yep.
And you put a slice of tomato, a slice of zucchini, maybe a slice of onion or a leek or something like that. And you make a whole tureen full of them, a whole roasting pan full of them, standing up.
Okay.
But I got some from the market a couple of weeks ago, and they were so watery. They were too big. So that if the zucchinis are too big, you're just going to have soup.
Yeah. Actually, that's what my friend in Rhode Island said. She said the zucchini crop this year is very watery due to all the rain. And
There's so much rain. That's right.
Been doing well.
That's what happened to me with strawberry jam this year. I made strawberry jam. It took so long to cook down because of the rain. It was the same thing.
Well, that reminds me, in your book, you talk about making apricot preserves. Is it David that makes the apricot preserves and his little technique that he did? If you want to talk about that.
Oh, it's a wonderful thing. And, here we get apricots for 25 minutes. I mean, they're here and then they're gone. And when apricots are not ripe, they're not great. But this is a David Tanis recipe. And David would make these beautiful little jars of apricot. It was like if somebody gave you gold in a jar, that would be it. And he took the apricots and cooked them down, and he says, always use the right amount of sugar, because if you skimp on the sugar, you're not going to have the jam. And he lets them sit in a pan overnight.
Oh.
And it somehow makes it richer, better, more David, more unctuous. I don't know what. And I've learned to do that. And it's super simple. I mean, it's a little bit of lemon juice and sugar and apricots, and that's it. And it's halved, and it's wonderful. And then you're so glad to have them.
Isn't that the truth? I think I've just done some peach preserves that I'm trying not to eat because I'll want to have them later.
You want to have them, and you want to have them for later. So how do you do your peach preserves?
It's funny. I did it without knowing it, but on accident. I let it sit overnight. I had made it and then ran out of time. And this one batch I made, it's kind of the reason I brought it up. This batch was so good.
Yes.
Much better than the first batch I made.
Isn't that interesting? I know. It's something about that fruit that it picks up more flavor.
needs sometimes, we all need a nap. I need a nap.
Absolutely.
Maybe apricots and peaches need a nap.
Right.
Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, I was thinking about too, if you think about one of the through lines that I think when I was reading your book is this idea of like food and friendship with your stomach club that you had, and very jealous of your friend with his wine collection. He just wasn't drinking.
Yeah. That came and went.
Right. I think if you want to talk a little bit about the connections that you've made in friendships through food, because I feel like that's kind of, some of these things I know were your job and work, but it feels like you made some friends along the way. And
I think that I got to make the magazine I got to make because of Coleman and Christopher and me together, the three of us made a really strong team, and we have pretty exigent standards for what's good and what's real and what's not real and what's fake and what's and it's just trying to get to the authentic of what anything is, what its origins are. Why do you do a certain thing? Why do you drain eggplant, for example? Well, because it's bitter, and so you salt it to get rid of the bitterness. Well, there's something that's a very important thing to know. I always believe in a more in a wholesale way of dealing with a vegetable. How do we treat this thing? What do we know about this? And I've learned that from reading and from working with people who have the answer to that. And I guess I've always, I always feel like there's a one way to do the thing, a right way to do the thing, and then you can take off from there. And that's why I distrust recipes that are a little bit this and a little bit that, because I don't know where they're coming from.
Oh, right. What's their perspective?
Right.
What's their perspective? I was curious, you talk a little bit about Week in Review Taco Night, and which I thought was such a fun idea. And part of that's based on David's tacos. He had those fish tacos, but it also then reminded me of Michael Anthony's and that CSA box that he gives you. You want to talk a little bit about, because our listeners, a lot of them get the CSA box or some of those like imperfect food boxes, and think about, we'll go to our Facebook group and say, what the heck do I do with all this stuff?
Right.
And so if you have any idea, like any whisperings that might help our listeners with that.
Well, I think one of the daunting things for me with that CSA box was when these big radishes start coming. The daikons. Mm-hmm.
They can look like baseball bats.
Moo radishes. These are not things that we grew up with. These are Asian vegetables that have come into our kitchens, and you have to know how to deal with them. And it's not just, treat them like a radish. So I learned how to do the pickled daikon, which is the simplest thing in the world. I don't have the recipe in front of me, but a little bit of water and a little bit of sugar and a little bit of salt and a little vinegar boiled up. And all of a sudden you've made this big whacking daikon into something, you've tamed it into something that you can keep in a jar in the refrigerator and have as a little pickle with things. And I think Michael Anthony taught me about making pickles from things. And I think it's obviously as old as cooking, because it was preserving vegetables. But having that adds another layer to everything that you prepare. If you've got those pickles, if you've got those preserves, if you've got those sauces, you can brighten up anything that you're contemplating for dinner. Eggs with any of those is great.
Oh, for sure. I think and if you have an egg, you've got supper. What were you eating with your daikon radish pickles? What do you put them on? What do you think?
Well, if I have like a little piece of meat steak left over, and I'll have that cold, and I'll put the daikon radish with that, or even a tuna salad. With awfully good to liven up a tuna salad. Let's see what else. And it's also good with other vegetables like cabbage. If you saute cabbage quickly, and it just brightens things up.
Well, I want to make sure that I don't take too much more of your time, but if there anything else that you'd like to talk about your book, or where people can get it, if you're going to be doing any book tour types of things.
The book goes on sale September 7th.
Great.
And available at all the usual places.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
I really
thank you. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Like I said, that was such a fun interview to have, and I could have talked to her for another couple hours. She's the type of person you just want to have over for a cup of coffee. I hope you enjoyed that too. And if you did, please feel free to check out our Dinner Sisters Facebook group. We are really excited to talk about all those sorts of things over there. And this week, we are giving away a Dorothy Callan's Kitchen Whispers book if you sign up for our newsletter. So if you sign up, this is just the week that this is being released. So if you sign up in our newsletter list, you'll be entered into a drawing out of anyone who's on our newsletter list. So whether you joined this week, last week, or 2 years ago, you'll be entered in the raffle. We'll put your name in, and then you could possibly win a copy of Dorothy Callan's new book, The Kitchen Whisperer. So look for that. In any case, we are just excited to have her on, and thank you as always for listening. That's it for the Dinner Sisters. We'll save a spot at the table for you.